One final bit on the faro regarding type of card or the cut of the card. So this deck of Hoyles here is a traditionally cut deck of cards. With traditionally cut cards, the way that they're produced is that the cards come off of the press in one giant sheet, all the cards face up, and they run through a machine with blades that chop the cards through the face. The blades come along and they're chopping the card, this big sheet, into the individual cards going through the face. This is the way it was traditionally done, and it's the way that it's pretty common today as well. There was a kind of a dark period in the late 90s up until through the early 2000s where United States Playing Card Company started doing a lot of this non-traditional cutting. The non-traditional cutting is where the exact same thing, you have a sheet of cards, but instead of cutting them through the face, they cut them through the back. Now this was great because it meant that they could very easily line up the blades and get very uniform borders around the cards. So if you look at old playing cards that were traditionally cut, you might have noticed that like borders are often a little thicker on one side or thinner on the other. They've improved this greatly over the last decade, and so now they've kind of moved back to traditional cuts. People like traditional cuts in general, and the reason that people like traditional cuts, or that one of the reasons that magicians like the traditional cut, is that with a traditional cut, the cards will faro face down. They faro really well face down. With the non-traditional cut, where the cuts are through the face, you will find that the cards do not like to faro. You can see I'm getting stuck. I'm having to fight my way to get this to faro. And this is a pretty worn deck, so as they get older, it does become easier to faro the wrong direction, but in general, you're always fighting against the card with the non-traditional cut. The reason being is that when that knife passes through the card, going this way, it leaves a bevel going this direction off of every edge on the card. When it cuts through the face, the bevel goes this way through the card. That beveling creates this angle for which the cards actually kind of intermesh. So hard to explain exactly with my fingers, but basically with the traditional cut, they are angled a little bit like this so that they want to weave like this, but when they're cut at that down angle going the other way, they want to weave going this way, which means that you have to turn them over if you want them to faro in kind of a nice face down, face up way, or in a nice smooth way. So let me give you an example. Here's a non-traditionally cut deck of foils, and you'll see it's a very odd deck, but you see these faro just fine face up, but because they're not traditionally cut, they do not want to faro face down. Matter of fact, you'll struggle quite a bit with these to get them, but you can get it, but it's tough. So one last point on the non-traditional versus traditional. First of all, make sure you figure out what you have before you get started with the faro. If you're trying to faro a non-traditional cut deck and you're trying to faro it face down, you will have trouble. Flip that deck over, and you can usually just tell what the cut is by testing your faro in both directions. If it goes smoothly one way and it doesn't the other, you know what you've got. If it goes smoothly with the face up, it's a non-traditional cut. If it goes smoothly with the face down, it's a traditional cut. It's just important that you know which. A lot of people might say, well, what's the use of these non-traditionally cut ones because I can't faro with them facing down, and who shuffles cards facing up? Well, there is one kind of interesting quirk of the non-traditional cut. I'm just going to show that as a little bonus bit, but one thing that you do get is that if you like to do table work, the non-traditionally cut cards will actually table faro just fantastically. That's where you are taking them, butting them up to each other, and then just bringing a little upward pressure, and they just want to faro. You'll notice that they will interleave just fine in this direction. You will not be able to do that same kind of action With a traditionally cut deck of cards, you can't, they just don't want to do it. Flip a deck that's traditionally cut over, and they'll do the same thing. So just something that's kind of interesting and a little quirk about the differences of those two. So hopefully this was helpful.